There is a quiet moment at the poker table that often goes unnoticed. It happens when a player lets go of a hand. No fanfare. No spotlight. Just a small decision, made in silence, that shapes everything that comes next. Tonight, the focus stays with folding. Not as a sign of weakness, but as a steady, active choice. Folding protects your bankroll before it ever grows it. It keeps your decisions clear and your pace unhurried. Over time, the players who fold well are the ones who last. They let go early, before things get cloudy. They choose clarity over curiosity. Each fold is a quiet defense, not just for your chips, but for your confidence and your future decisions. Folding is not just an action. It is a habit, a philosophy, and a signal of patience that defines the kind of player you become. Let the pace settle now. There is no need to rush or anticipate. The sound will stay calm and steady. Nothing sudden will pull you away. You can let time stretch out here, with each breath, as we stay with the quiet strength of folding. Chapter 1. Reframing: What Folding Really Means. Giving up your claim to the pot at any stage of a hand changes what you're playing for and how you manage your resources. When you fold in no-limit Texas Hold'em, your cards are dead and you can't win that particular pot, but you've also made a clear choice about how you want to use your time, focus, and chips. Most players, especially when they're starting out, see folding as something that happens to them, something passive, or even embarrassing. But if you look closer, you'll see that folding is actually a deliberate act, one that sits right at the heart of long-term poker strategy. Let's slow down and think about what it means to fold with intention. Every time you're dealt 2 cards, you're looking at just one of 1,326 possible starting hands. That's a huge range of possibilities, and most of those hands simply aren't going to be profitable to play over the long run. In full-ring cash games, skilled players fold the majority of their starting hands before the flop. They're not doing this because they're afraid, or because they're not interested in playing. They're making a conscious decision to pass on hands that don't give them a strong enough chance to win chips from their opponents. If you've ever felt frustration or disappointment after folding, it's worth asking yourself why. Sometimes it's just the feeling of missing out. Sometimes it's tied to ego, or the belief that you should always be battling for every pot. But poker's not about winning every hand, it's about making the best decision possible, with the information you have, again and again, over hundreds and thousands of hands. Folding is a way of saying, I choose not to invest more in this situation because I don't have the right cards, the right position, or the right read. It's a positive, active choice. When you fold a hand, especially pre-flop, you're protecting your bankroll from unnecessary swings. Think about the way tight pre-flop hand selection leads to more stable results over time. If you're choosing to play only the hands that have a clear mathematical edge, you're reducing your exposure to big downswings. You're also giving yourself more chances to focus your energy on spots where your edge is bigger and your chances of success are higher. That's not retreating from the action. That's using discipline to save your chips and your mental clarity for battles that matter. A lot of the time, folding is about recognizing when the odds are simply stacked against you. If you're facing a strong bet from an opponent who doesn't bluff often, and you're holding a weak or marginal hand, folding can be the most rational decision. You're not giving up. You're refusing to put money in a spot where the math just isn't on your side. The best players in the world aren't ashamed to fold. In fact, they fold far more often than most people realize, because they know that every chip you don't lose is just as important as every chip you win. There's something else to consider too. Folding isn't just about the chips. It's also about protecting your focus and your mental energy. When you fold a hand, you're giving yourself a moment to breathe, to watch the action, to pick up information on your opponents. You're not sitting out, you're gathering data, keeping your mind sharp for the next opportunity. That kind of presence is what lets you spot patterns, pick up on habits, and get ready to act decisively when a better hand comes your way. The real skill comes from knowing when folding is the right move for you. It's easy to fall into a pattern where you fold out of habit, without really thinking about it. That's not what we're aiming for. Folding with intention means pausing for a moment and asking, does this situation give me a real advantage, or am I just hoping for something unlikely? If the answer is that you don't have the right cards, the right position, or the right spot, then folding is your way of keeping control over your game. Over time, you'll start to notice that the players who seem calm and confident at the table are the ones who fold without regret. They're not attached to every hand. They're not chasing losses or letting their ego tell them to fight every battle. Instead, they're choosing their moments, saving their chips for when the odds are in their favor. That mindset doesn't just protect your bankroll, it keeps you clear-headed, focused, and ready to capitalize when the right opportunity comes along. So the next time you're faced with a decision to fold, try to see it as an intentional act. You're not stepping back because you're afraid. You're stepping aside so you can move forward when it counts. Folding is a skill, not a surrender. When you fold with purpose, you're taking control of your story at the table, one decision at a time. Let that sense of calm control settle in, and remember you're always choosing how to play, even when you fold. Chapter 2. How folding protects bankroll before it grows it. Folding changes the way you experience risk at the table, by putting you in direct control of how much you expose your bankroll to loss. When you choose to fold, you're not just passing on a hand. You're actively making a decision to protect your resources and avoid situations where the odds are stacked against you. That's the first real shield you have when you sit down to play. Most of the time, the hands you're dealt in Texas Hold'em just aren't worth playing. Out of over 1,300 starting hand combinations, only a small fraction show a consistent profit in the long run. There's a reason you'll see experienced players quietly mucking hand after hand, while others get impatient. They understand that folding isn't just about letting go of weak cards. It's about choosing not to get tangled up in situations where your money's more likely to disappear than grow. This habit of folding the majority of hands might not look exciting from the outside. You're not stacking chips or pulling off wild bluffs. But that's exactly the point. Most profit in poker doesn't come from dramatic moments. It comes from quietly avoiding the steady drip of small losses that build up when you play too many hands or chase after pots that aren't really yours. When you fold, you're saying no to a negative expectation spot. Over time, that adds up to a lot of money you never had to lose. It's easy to forget that every chip you don't lose is just as valuable as every chip you win. Especially when your bankroll is small, every decision carries more weight. The stress of playing above your means can push you into making calls or raises you know you shouldn't make. That kind of pressure leads to mistakes, and even skilled players can end up going broke if they're not careful about protecting what they have. Folding gives you a way to sidestep that trap. You don't have to fight every battle. You just have to survive long enough to pick better spots. If your bankroll takes a hit and drops below what's safe for your current game, it's usually best to step down to lower stakes. There's no shame in protecting your funds by moving down. In fact, It's one of the smartest adjustments you can make. Folding more frequently and being highly selective about which games you enter helps you weather downswings and avoid the kind of variance that can wipe you out. The tighter you play, especially in tough times, the more you let your patience work for you. You'll notice that the players who last the longest aren't always the ones making the biggest moves. They're the ones who know when to let go and save their chips for better opportunities. That's not a passive approach. It's a kind of discipline that keeps you in the game session after session, even when the cards aren't falling your way. They're protecting their bankroll, not just for the next hand, but for the hundreds or thousands of hands still to come. Variance is always going to be part of poker, but how much it affects you depends on how you play your starting hands. If you're folding hands that show a negative expectation, you're naturally reducing the swings in your results. You're also making it easier to stick to your plan and avoid the emotional roller coaster that comes from chasing losses or taking unnecessary risks. That steadiness is what lets you rebuild after a setback and stay focused on making good decisions. There's a quiet strength in folding that doesn't get much attention. Nobody at the table is going to pat you on the back for mucking another marginal hand. You won't hear applause for passing on a spot that looked tempting but didn't offer the right odds. Still, every time you fold in a disciplined way, you're making a small positive step for your long-term results. It's a decision that keeps your bankroll intact and gives you more chances to find spots where you actually have the edge. Think of folding as your invisible shield. Most people won't notice it, but it's always working for you in the background. It's what keeps your losses from piling up and lets you stay in control even when the deck seems cold. When you start to see folding as an active choice, one that protects your bankroll and your future opportunities, it becomes much easier to do it without regret. You don't have to win every pot or play every hand to be a successful poker player. In fact, the opposite is usually true, especially when you're working with a limited bankroll. The next time you find yourself reaching for a call in a spot that doesn't feel quite right, remember that folding is your first and strongest defense. It's the decision that keeps your resources safe and your options open for when the real opportunities come along. Let that patience guide you, and you'll find that folding is not just a way to avoid losing, it's a quiet, powerful way to keep your bankroll alive and growing. Chapter 3: Why winning players fold more often than losing players. Folding changes the entire structure of your poker decisions, because it puts you in control of how much risk you take on with each hand. When you choose to fold, you're not just giving up your cards. You're making a conscious decision to step away from a situation that doesn't look promising, even when part of you wants to stay in and see what happens. A lot of people think winning at poker is about making big calls or pulling off flashy bluffs. The truth is, most of the time, the best players are quietly folding. They do it over and over, hand after hand, letting go of situations that aren't worth the trouble. In Texas Hold'em, there are over 1,300 distinct starting hand combinations. Most of them are not worth playing, especially in tough games. That means folding is not some rare event. It's the default action for a disciplined player. It doesn't always feel good to fold. There's a real pull to see another card, or to hope that your hand will magically improve. Sometimes you might be tempted to play just because you have a favorite hand, or because you haven't had anything good in a while. But the players who win over the long run don't let those feelings guide their decisions. They understand that poker is a game of patience, not just action. Folding is their way of protecting their bankroll and their peace of mind. Every time you fold, you're saving chips for a better spot. You're avoiding situations where the odds are stacked against you, even if it's not obvious right away. Think about it this way. If you play every hand hoping to get lucky, you're putting your money at risk over and over in spots where you probably don't have the edge. That adds up quickly, and it's one of the main reasons losing players find themselves chasing losses or dipping deeper into their pockets. Winning players know that folding is not about being passive or scared. It's about being selective. It's about saying, I'm not interested in this one. I'll wait for a spot where the cards, the position, and the situation make sense for me. That kind of discipline doesn't come from reading a chart or memorizing a formula. It comes from experience and from learning to trust yourself, even when it's hard. There's another layer here too. Folding doesn't just protect your chips in the moment. It helps you manage your bankroll over weeks and months of playing. In no-limit Texas Hold'em cash games, even the best players go through rough patches. Variance can bring swings of 35 or even 40 buy-ins over long stretches. If you're not folding enough, those swings can get even bigger, and that makes it harder to ride out the tough times. That's why bankroll management and folding go hand in hand. Professionals who rely on poker for income usually keep 35 to 65 buy-ins set aside, just to handle the ups and downs. If they start losing too much, they move down in stakes to protect what they have left. Recreational players might not need as much, since they can add money from their regular jobs, but the principle is the same. The more you fold, the smaller your swings tend to be, and the less likely you are to hit a streak that wipes you out. It can be tough to watch someone else drag a big pot when you folded what turns out to be the best hand. It stings, and your mind starts to second guess. But when you look at the bigger picture, those moments are just blips. Folding the hands you should fold is what keeps you in the game for the long haul. It's what gives you the chance to be there when the real opportunities come up. If you find yourself struggling to let go, remember that every fold is a decision to invest in your future hands. You're not missing out. You're building a cushion for the times when you really do have a strong hand or a good read on the table. Over time, you'll start to notice that the pots you win are bigger, and the pots you lose are smaller. That's not luck. That's the quiet power of folding at work. Letting go of a hand is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of control. It's a way of saying that you're in charge of your own game, not just along for the ride. The players who fold more often are the ones who last longest and who keep their bankrolls healthy. Folding is a routine, almost meditative part of their process. They do it calmly, without drama, and they move on to the next hand without looking back. If you can make folding feel normal, even comfortable, you'll find that the emotional weight starts to fade. Each time you fold, it gets a little easier. The patience you build with each quiet decision becomes the foundation for everything else you do at the table. Over time, that discipline pays off in ways that are easy to miss but impossible to ignore. The real strength in poker often shows up in the hands you let go, not the ones you play. Chapter 4. Folding creates better decisions later. Folding changes the structure of your decisions by creating space for your mind to reset and recover. When you let go of a hand early, you give yourself a chance to step back from whatever pressure or emotion might have started to build. That moment of release is more than just saving chips. It's a way to clear out the clutter and keep your thinking sharp as the session goes on. Every time you fold, you're making a choice not to get tangled up in spots that could drain your focus or energy. You're not just saying no to one bet or one pot. You're really giving yourself a brief pause, a micro break that lets your attention recover. In poker, willpower is a limited resource. Each tough decision chips away at it, especially if you're in a rough patch or facing a series of close calls. By folding, you avoid compounding mistakes that often come from mental fatigue or emotional swings. There's a very real physiological side to this too. When you fold and let yourself breathe for a moment, your body activates the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the system that helps lower stress hormones and brings you back to a calmer state. Even just a few seconds between hands can be enough for your mind to catch up and your self-control to reset. You'll find that your ability to regulate your emotions and make solid decisions goes up when you use these small windows to regroup. Sometimes, folding isn't just about the cards or the math. It's about overcoming that little tug you feel from wanting to chase what you've already put in the pot. There's a name for this. It's called being emotionally attached to invested resources. That's a tough habit to break, and it takes real mental determination to do it. But when you make a disciplined fold, even if it stings at first, you'll usually find that the discomfort fades pretty quickly. After the hand is over, once your emotions settle down, you'll often look back and realize that letting go was the right move. That's how you reinforce good habits and start to build confidence in your decision-making process. If you've ever watched experienced players during long sessions, you'll notice they're not getting pulled into every pot or fighting for every marginal spot. They use folding almost like a tool to manage their own mental state. When a spot feels too uncertain or the situation seems too likely to spiral, they let it go. That's not passive or timid. That's a proactive strategy to keep their mind fresh for when it really counts. By folding when the spot is unclear, they're less likely to carry frustration or regret into the next hand. That's how they stay focused on long-term goals, instead of getting stuck on one bad beat or one tough call. It's worth remembering that folding doesn't mean you're giving up or playing scared. It's simply a way to preserve your best judgment for the moments that truly matter. Every time you pass on a marginal spot, you're saving mental energy for the next critical decision. Over the course of a session, those little resets add up. They help you avoid tilt, keep you from chasing losses, and make it easier to spot good opportunities when they come. Taking a short break after a difficult fold can be especially powerful. If you feel your emotions getting stirred up or your frustration building, just stepping away from the table for a minute or two can help you regain your composure. That pause gives you time to let the frustration pass and the urge to make impulsive decisions fade away. When you come back, you're usually more centered, more patient, and more able to see the game clearly. You'll notice that when you use folding as a mental reset, your overall session feels less draining. You're not carrying the weight of every close call or every missed opportunity. Instead, you're approaching each new hand with a fresh perspective and a steady hand. That's a big edge, especially late in a session when most players start to feel the effects of decision fatigue. Letting go of marginal spots is one of the simplest ways to keep your mind from overheating. You're not trying to win every pot or solve every puzzle. You're just making sure you have the clarity and energy to make the best choices when the stakes are highest. By folding with intention, you're setting yourself up for stronger, more focused play as the session unfolds. If you make a tough fold and feel a little regret, give yourself a moment to breathe. Most of the time, that regret will pass, and you'll see that you've actually reinforced the quality of your decision. You're building a habit of discipline that pays off over the long run. That's how folding, far from being a retreat, becomes one of your most valuable tools for staying sharp and making great decisions hand after hand. When you trust yourself to let go of hands that don't serve your goals, you're not just saving chips. You're protecting your focus, your patience, and your ability to play your best game all the way through. That's the real strength that comes from folding with purpose. Chapter 5: Folding as a long-term winning philosophy. Giving up your claim to the pot by folding changes the structure of decision-making in poker. Instead of chasing every hand, you're choosing to preserve resources for better opportunities. That one decision seems small in the moment, but over thousands of hands, it shapes your entire approach to the game. If you let folding become a steady guide, rather than a last resort, you'll start to see poker less as a sequence of urgent battles and more as a long, patient campaign. If you think about it, folding is the one decision in no-limit Texas Hold'em where you draw a hard line and say, "I'm not willing to risk any more here." You're not surrendering, you're protecting. Each time you fold, you're making a conscious choice to save your chips for a spot where the odds and situation favor you more. Over time, the discipline to fold when you sense you're behind can be what keeps your bankroll healthy and your mind clear. This approach has long-term consequences. When you let folding become a core value, you're not just reacting to a bad feeling or a tough spot. You're building habits that lead to more stable results, session after session. Tight pre-flop hand selection in cash games, for example, has been shown to create steadier outcomes and smaller swings in your bankroll than playing loosely. The numbers back this up over large samples, and you'll see your results start to converge toward your true win rate as the hands add up. The more you respect this process, the less you'll find yourself at the mercy of wild swings. There's also a mental benefit. When you're disciplined about folding, you're less likely to tilt or chase after lost chips. You stay grounded, even when the cards aren't falling your way. That kind of composure is hard to maintain in the heat of a long session, but it's what separates steady winners from gamblers. Every time you fold a hand that isn't quite good enough, you're reinforcing your ability to wait for the right moment. That patience lets you avoid the emotional highs and lows that come from big, risky plays that didn't need to happen. Bankroll management is another place where folding as a philosophy pays off. Professional players, especially those who depend entirely on poker for their income, face a unique kind of pressure. They can't just add more money when things go south. If you're under-rolled for the stakes you're playing, every decision feels heavier. The fear of ruin creeps in, and that can lead to poor choices. When you fold more often and avoid marginal situations, you're not just saving chips, you're protecting your entire career. Following guidelines to keep at least 35 to 65 buy-ins for your game, and moving down in stakes after a downswing, both flow naturally from a mindset that values survival and sustainability above short-term glory. It's easy to overlook how much variance shapes your journey as a player. Some days you'll feel like you can't lose, and other days nothing goes right. But over thousands and thousands of hands, the impact of one big call or one marginal bluff starts to fade. What remains are the habits you build. If you let folding be your compass, you'll find that your bankroll swings are less severe, your confidence stays steadier, and you're less tempted to chase after losses. That's how you keep yourself in the game session after session, year after year. There's nothing passive about disciplined folding. It's an active choice to avoid the traps that catch so many players. You're not folding out of fear, but out of respect for the long-term nature of the game. You're trusting that another spot will come, and you're willing to wait for it. Over time, this patience and restraint will quietly transform your relationship with poker. You'll start to see each hand as just one piece of a much bigger story. Letting folding take center stage in your philosophy doesn't mean you're giving up on the game's excitement or challenge. If anything, it frees you to play your best when it matters most. because you're not weighed down by regret or desperation. The chips you save by folding now become the ammunition you need when the right moment finally arrives. So, as you move forward, let yourself settle into this slower, more deliberate rhythm. Trust that folding over and over, session after session, builds a foundation of confidence and resilience. The game will test your patience, but if you treat folding as your ally, you'll find yourself standing strong when others have burned out. That quiet strength is what carries true winners through the long run. Chapter 6: Folding before the situation gets complicated. Making the choice to fold early in a hand changes the structure of your decisions for the rest of that round. When you let go before the action gets layered or confusing, you're protecting yourself from spots that demand tough judgment with uncertain information. That's not just about saving chips on a particular hand. It's about keeping your mental energy sharp and your decision quality high for the long run. Every time you decide to continue with a marginal hand, you're signing up for a sequence of decisions that can get murky. You might find yourself guessing whether an opponent's bet means strength or just a bluff. You could end up facing a big bet on the river, holding a hand that can't beat much, but also can't quite fold without a second thought. These moments add stress and use up your mental reserves. Poker's already a game that asks a lot of your attention. If you're always putting yourself in these tough spots, you'll wear down faster, and your decisions later in the session might not be as crisp. Now, folding isn't just a way to avoid the hard stuff. It's an active decision to keep things simple when there's no clear path forward. When you fold early, you're saying, "I'd rather wait for a spot where my hand is stronger, or the situation is clearer." That discipline helps you preserve your stack and keeps your mind uncluttered. The fewer complicated post-flop spots you face, the more energy you'll have when you really need it. Think about how this ties into the way professional players manage their bankrolls. For someone who depends entirely on poker for income, the risk of losing too much at once is a real threat. That's why they keep a reserve of at least 100 to 150 buy-ins. Variance can be brutal, and even the best players can go through stretches where they lose 35 or more buy-ins over a huge sample size. When you fold early in unclear spots, you're helping yourself avoid the kind of wild swings that can threaten your long-term ability to stay in the game. It's similar if you're just playing for fun, but the pressure's different. Recreational players might have a smaller reserve, knowing they can reload from their regular paycheck if things go south. Still, when you fold early and avoid getting tangled in tricky situations, you're making sure your sessions are more enjoyable and less stressful. You're less likely to get frustrated by big, confusing losses, and you're more likely to see poker as a fun challenge instead of a grind. There's also a strong link between tight pre-flop hand selection and stable bankroll swings. If you're only playing hands that have a strong chance to connect with the board or hold up against pressure, you're usually not getting drawn into as many difficult post-flop decisions. That consistency shows up in your results. You'll see fewer wild upswings and downswings, and your bankroll will move more steadily over time. It's not about being afraid to play. It's about picking your spots so you have the edge more often. Playing within your bankroll works the same way. If you stick to games where one buy-in is only about 1% of your total bankroll, you're giving yourself plenty of room to handle those inevitable swings. Folding early in marginal spots fits perfectly with this approach. You're not just protecting your stack on one hand. You're making sure you don't get pulled into a spiral where every tough decision could have consequences for your entire bankroll. Some players get curious or want to see just one more card when things are unclear. It's a natural feeling. Poker can be tempting in that way, especially when you're not sure if your opponent's really strong or just pushing you around. But if you make a habit of calling in those spots, you're inviting more confusion and more risk. The tough decisions pile up, and soon you're in territory where the right answer isn't obvious, and the cost of a mistake can be high. On the other hand, when you fold early, you're setting boundaries for yourself. You're saying that you value clarity over curiosity. That doesn't mean you never take a risk, or that every fold is perfect. It just means you're choosing to play the hands where you have a clear plan, and letting go of the rest. That's a skill that keeps you in control, both of your chips and your mindset. Over time, this approach leads to better results. You'll find that your sessions feel more manageable, and you're not as drained by the end of a long night. You'll also notice that your bankroll holds up better against the natural swings of the game. By making folding an active part of your strategy, you're building a foundation for long-term success and a more enjoyable experience at the table. Letting go early, before things get complicated, is one of the habits that separates steady, disciplined players from those who burn out chasing every possibility. When you fold with intention, you're not giving up. You're making a decision that keeps you focused, confident, and ready for the next good spot. The cards will keep coming, and there's always another hand where the situation will be clearer and your edge will be stronger. Chapter 7. Folding removes the need to guess. Decisions become much simpler when you recognize that folding is a deliberate way to avoid costly uncertainty. When you face a tough spot, and the information just does not add up, folding quietly shifts the burden away from you. That single action means you do not have to guess what your opponent holds, or how your hand stacks up against their range. Instead of wrestling with incomplete clues and shaky assumptions, you simply step aside and wait for a spot where your reasoning feels firm. In no-limit Texas Hold'em, these ambiguous situations come up all the time. Sometimes you are sitting there with a hand that looks pretty good, but you do not really know where it stands. Maybe the board is messy, or the action just does not make sense, or your opponent's bets do not fit a clear pattern. In those moments, it is easy to want to call and see what happens, hoping your curiosity pays off. Many players, especially in cash games, end up putting chips in just because they do not want to fold and be left wondering. But when you call in these spots, a lot of the time you are not making a careful calculation. You are guessing. Maybe your opponent has it. Maybe they do not. You do not have enough solid information, so you are left hanging in the middle. Over one hand, that guess might work out. Over 100 hands, though, these thin calls usually chip away at your stack. The edge in poker comes from making good decisions when you have a clear sense of what is going on, not from hoping you get lucky when things are cloudy. Folding is not about giving up. It is not about being scared or playing too tight. It is about recognizing that some situations do not give you enough to work with, and choosing to save your chips for a better spot. When you fold in a tough spot, you are not losing the pot. You are keeping yourself from making a decision that is mostly guesswork. That discipline pays off in the long run, even if it does not feel dramatic in the moment. There is a mental side to this too. Every time you try to figure out a hard hand, you are spending energy. If you force yourself to call in every uncertain spot, you will end up tired and frustrated as the session goes on. By folding when you do not have a strong read or a clear plan, you keep your mind fresh. You are not just saving chips, you are protecting your decision-making for the hands that really matter. Over the course of a session, that makes a bigger difference than you might think. In no-limit Texas Hold'em, most of your profit comes from the hands where you have a clear advantage. The rest of the time, you are just trying not to give those winnings back through marginal calls and thin guesses. Folding in the face of uncertainty is a core skill that helps you hold on to your edge. It is not flashy, and you will not get any compliments for it, but it quietly protects your bankroll over time. You can get better at this with practice. At first, it might feel frustrating to let go of hands where you are not sure. You might worry that you are missing value or being too passive. But as you play more, you will start to notice when you are really making a reasoned decision and when you are just hoping for the best. That awareness lets you fold without regret, knowing you are making the right trade-off for the long run. Nobody likes to fold a hand and watch the pot slide away. But if you look at the bigger picture, you will see that folding in tough, unclear spots is what keeps you in the game. You are not just folding this hand, you are setting yourself up to play the next one, with more chips and a clearer head. That patience adds up, hand after hand, session after session. Letting go of the need to guess frees you up to focus on the spots where your edge is real. That is where the true profit comes from, in poker. When you fold because the information is not there, you are not missing out. You are just waiting for your next real opportunity, and that is exactly how you stay ahead. Chapter 8. Folding protects confidence, not just chips. Disciplined folding changes the way you approach every decision at the table. When you let go of a hand by choice, you are not just saving chips. You are also protecting the part of yourself that needs to trust your own judgment. This is a quiet kind of power, and it shapes your mindset more deeply than most people realize. Think about what happens when you face a difficult spot. Maybe you are tempted to chase a hand that does not quite fit, or you are unsure whether to call a bet with something marginal. If you pause and fold, it is not about backing away from risk out of fear. It is about recognizing the difference between a hand you want to play and a spot that is worth investing in. That kind of discipline is not passive. It is an active signal that you are listening to your process, not just your emotions. Letting go of marginal hands is often a sign that you are grounded in your own standards. In no-limit Texas Hold'em cash games, those standards matter because the swings can be steep. Even a player who makes good choices most of the time can run into stretches where variance pulls them down by 35 buy-ins or more. If you are always fighting for every pot, chasing every possible edge, those swings can start to feel personal. They can shake your confidence and cloud your next decision. That is where folding becomes more than a way to avoid losing chips. It becomes a way to keep your mind clear for the next hand. When you make a well-timed fold, you are telling yourself that you trust your read, even if it is not always perfect. You are not just hoping to get lucky. You are deciding that this hand does not meet your criteria, and that is enough. That sense of control is what lets you keep your focus steady as the session goes on. There is a kind of relief that comes from making a clear, intentional fold. You feel it in your body as much as your mind. The tension goes out of your shoulders. Your breathing slows down. You are not left second-guessing yourself because you know you made the choice for a reason. Over time, that kind of clarity adds up. It keeps you from building up regret or frustration, which can lead to tilt if you are not careful. Bankroll management is another place where folding plays a central role. The 1% rule in no-limit Texas Hold'em cash games is there for a reason. If you keep your risk per buy-in to 1% of your total bankroll, you are giving yourself room to handle the inevitable swings. But that system only works if you are willing to fold when a hand is not profitable. If you keep playing marginal spots, you are exposing yourself to bigger swings and more stress. Selective folding helps you keep your bankroll stable. and that stability supports your confidence session after session. When you look at the long run, it is the disciplined folds that keep your decision-making sharp. If you are always in the middle of tough situations, with weak hands, you start to second-guess yourself. You burn mental energy that could be better spent on the hands that really matter. By folding more often in spots that are not profitable, you preserve your energy and your standards. You are not just reacting to what is in front of you. You are building a habit that lets you handle the ups and downs with more resilience. It is easy to forget that every decision at the table is connected. If you let one tough hand throw you off, it can ripple into the next one. When you fold with purpose, you are cutting off that spiral before it starts. You are reminding yourself that your process is what matters, not the outcome of a single hand. That is how you keep your confidence intact, even when the cards are not going your way. A well-timed fold is a foundation for growth. It is not something you do because you are afraid to lose. It is something you do because you are committed to making the best possible decisions, again and again. Over time, those small acts of discipline add up to a stronger, steadier game. They let you play with more clarity, more focus, and more trust in your own judgment. You will notice the difference in your sessions. You will feel less pulled by every swing, less caught up in what you cannot control. You will find it easier to stay calm and present, no matter how the cards fall. That is the quiet power of folding with intention. It is not about stepping away from the action. It is about standing up for your standards, protecting your confidence, and giving yourself the best possible chance to grow as a player. Chapter 9. Folding defines the type of player you become. Every time you let go of a hand, you're making a choice that shapes how you're seen and how you see yourself as a player. Folding isn't just a technical decision about cards and math. It's a habit that quietly builds your identity at the table, one hand at a time. When you choose to fold, you're signaling something real about your priorities and your patience. You're showing you're not here for every pot, and you're willing to wait for the right spots rather than chase every possibility. In No Limit Texas Hold'em, folding means you're stepping away from the current pot. Your cards are dead, and your claim is gone. With 1,326 unique two-card starting hands in the deck, most hands you see won't be worth playing. That's just the math of the game. Over time, the majority of hands you're dealt will end up in the muck before the flop, especially if you're choosing your spots carefully. This isn't just a tendency among cautious players, it's a consistent trait among those who want to give themselves the best chance of winning in the long run. Think about what happens in a cash game when you keep folding hands that don't offer strong potential. Other players start to notice. They see you're not chasing every pot. They might label you as tight, or patient, or even disciplined. These aren't just words, they're reflections of the values you bring to the table. When you fold weak hands and stick to premium holdings, you're telling the table you care about quality over quantity. That message gets absorbed, hand after hand, until your table image takes shape. That image matters. When you're known as a player who folds more often, opponents start to adjust. They might give your bets more credit, or hesitate before trying to bluff you. They may even choose not to challenge your raises without strong hands of their own. This can open up new opportunities for you in future hands, letting you leverage your reputation to win pots that might otherwise be contested. At the same time, it can also mean you'll find yourself in fewer wild situations, because your opponents expect you to have something solid when you decide to play a hand. There's a quiet strength in folding, even though it doesn't always feel that way. The urge to play more hands and chase more action is real, especially when you're bored, frustrated, or just looking for excitement. But each time you resist that urge, you're reinforcing your own self-control and your commitment to a long-term approach. You're choosing to avoid situations where your edge is thin or your risk is high, and that choice adds up over hundreds or thousands of hands. Folding isn't about playing scared or running from tough spots. It's about recognizing that not every spot is worth fighting for. In fact, folding marginal hands before the flop often helps reduce the swings in your results, leading to a more stable bankroll over time. That stability can be especially important when your bankroll is stretched thin for the stakes you're playing. In those times, moving down in limits and playing even tighter can help you keep your decisions sharp and protect yourself from unnecessary risk. There are trade-offs, of course. Folding more means you'll miss out on some thin value situations, where a loose call or a speculative play might have worked out. But over the course of many sessions, tight hand selection tends to improve your overall win rate, because you're putting yourself in better spots more often, and avoiding the worst of the variance that comes with chasing weak hands. Over time, your folding decisions become a kind of signature. They're not always flashy, and they don't draw attention like a big bluff or a dramatic call. But they're noticed, especially by players who pay attention to patterns. Your folds show that you value patience, that you're thinking about the long game, and that you're not afraid to wait for situations where the odds are more in your favor. As the hands go by and your folding habits become more consistent, you'll find that your table image becomes clearer, not just to others, but to yourself. You start to trust your own discipline. You begin to see folding as an active choice, not a passive one. Each fold is a small investment in your long-term success, a sign that you're playing your own game, not someone else's. In the end, folding is more than just a technical play. It's a core part of what makes a player resilient and successful in the long run. The calm, steady habit of letting go when the time isn't right becomes a defining trait, one that shapes your reputation, your results, and your own sense of who you are at the table.